In a medium that's supposed to be an all-encompassing one, video games, like most media, can be slow to adapt to changing societies and norms. Video game tropes and ideas that might have been accepted years ago might not be quite as applicable anymore. For example, the perception that video games and the industry itself is a guys-only club has long since been proven false, but that idea still exists in some quarters. However, in recent years, the industry has shown a modicum of progress in how it represents not only women, but also people who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, etc. How are they represented in video games and in the gaming community at large? What can we do to be more accepting of this? What can the video game industry do to be more progressive? You'll hear our thoughts and opinions right here on this episode of Downloadable Content. Hello everyone, welcome to Downloadable Content. I'm Brian, still Brian, will always be Brian, and with me we have three people who have agreed to come on and be part of the Madcap Madness that is Downloadable Content. We have Kat.
Hi.
We have Sam.
Hey.
And we have Tanya.
Hello.
Welcome one and all to all new people. I'm so excited. This year we've seen a lot of new people jump on, which means that this podcast is finally catching on. Yes.
I love how you're almost cackling.
Almost. Tanya is a developer at Kizareth Studios. Have I pronounced that correctly?
Kizareth, but you're almost there.
Almost. I've never actually heard
me.
it. I've never actually heard it actually pronounced. I've only seen it, written. So. And Sam is the head of the video game website gamersagainstbigotry.org. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And Kat is just a lovable lump. No.
You want my credentials? We can start that laundry list.
I know your credentials. We'll take an hour.
The entire podcast later.
The entire podcast later, extensive resume. So, on this episode, we are going to be talking about the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgendered community in video games. This is an episode I've been wanting to do for a long time. I did one earlier this year talking about women in video games, and that's gone over very well. I haven't received any sort of massive flame wars over that episode, so this is an episode I've been wanting to do for a long time, mostly as an educational one for me, because I do not know all that many gamers who are in that category, and I also wanted to open up a discussion because, for all of the rage that goes on in the gaming community about this subject, there's a lot of good that goes on as well, and I wanted to have a positive civil discussion about that. What can we do to be more accepting and have the industry be more progressive? So we'll take a little time before we go into our discussion. I'll have Tanya first talk about what she does.
Well, I'm Tanya Botelho. I'm the CEO of Kizareth Studios. We currently we're in the process of making RPG games. We already have one out called Chronicles of a Dark Lord Episode 1 Tied to Fate. That's available on Desura, Gamersgate, Amazon, so forth. And we're working currently on the sequel, which is Episode 2 War of the Abyss, and that's due out.
All right, Sam, and you?
My name is Sam Killerman. I'm the executive director and founder of Gamers Against Bigotry, which is an international nonprofit organization based out of Texas. That's where we're registered. We're all volunteer. Every staff member is volunteer, but we have volunteer staff in 14 countries on 5 continents. We have pledge membership in over 77 countries. And our goal is simply to make gaming a welcoming space for gamers of all identities. The way we're doing that is through a pledge where gamers can say that they won't use bigoted language in games, through connections and collaborations with different game developers and game industry folks trying to make games themselves a bit more inclusive and welcoming, and then through educational efforts with the community at large.
Excellent. All noble stuff right there. Wonderful, wonderful things. So, with that said, I'm going to dive right into the discussion, talking about how gay lesbian characters have been portrayed in video games, historically portrayed, and then working up to games today. Historically, back in the early days of video gaming, that type of character was largely seen as taboo, especially in the States. I get the sense that there was a little bit more freedom in, say, Japan, where at the time most of our games were coming from, but games that had gay, lesbian, transgendered characters were made for that audience, and they were never intended for a Western audience to begin with.
When they made it over to the Western audience, it became a trope, and it was funny, or supposed to be funny.
Well, I mean, also back then, before the creation of the Entertainment Software Rating Board, the two major video game companies at the time, Nintendo and Sega, had their own internal policies on what made it into their games. Nintendo, of the two, was very fierce in its censorship, and that fierce censorship, even though they've largely let go of those policies, they're still considered the family-friendly sort of console games that, do not allow for things like that. The very first notable example that I can recall is the character Birdo.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mario 2.
Yes. Birdo was described in the original instruction manual of the game as thinking he was a girl and wanting to be called Birdetta. It was later censored by Nintendo in future appearances of the character. And also back in 1992, I didn't know this, Enix was ordered to remove a gay bar from Dragon Warrior 3 before the game could be sold for a Nintendo system.
I didn't know that.
Neither did I, and later after Square and Enix merged and Dragon Warrior 3 was going to be released for the Game Boy Color, they put the censored content back, because by that point Nintendo had largely relaxed their censorship policies.
Interesting.
And for a company who would later put out Conker's Bad Fur Day, this,
Love Conker. Oh, man.
So, that was Nintendo. Sega, well, even though Sega allowed the LGBT themes and characters in its games, they often chose to tone down or actually get rid of those characters when porting Asian games to American markets, which I knew. Like I said earlier, it's, anytime a game was being made for Western audiences, things like that tended to be censored or removed because otherwise, I guess massive uproar would happen or something. For example, in Phantasy Star 2, there was an NPC that was a musician who was openly gay, but for the American release, that character was edited so that the only acknowledgement of his orientation was his practice of charging all male characters less money for music lessons. Which is the trope I'm sort of familiar with, especially in older RPGs, where a character's sexuality is sort of used as a comic device. If a male character comes across as effeminate, for example, that's usually played up for humor. That is the trope I'm most familiar with. And it's actually a pretty common one, comical gender confusion. Um, any games, or any older games come to mind from any of you that might have played up some of those early tropes?
Final Fight.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. That's like the famous one.
Final Fight with poison. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep, poison.
Yeah, poison.
You know, because I was very strictly on the Nintendo side of the Nintendo Sega wars in the 90s. I did not play a lot of Sega games. I've never played Final Fight. So if any of you have any knowledge of that, enlighten me.
Well, Poison was I believe only recently confirmed that she is a post-op transsexual. But in the earlier in the earlier release of the game, for Sega and whatnot, it was confusion because it wasn't really said really what she was. So there was people saying, well, she's transgender, and then other people saying, well, no, it's just a regular woman, and then you have other people saying, no, we don't know, we have a clue. So it was kind of up in the air until I think only about a year ago or something like that, when they actually confirmed that Poison is a post-op transsexual woman, and I found that interesting because it took how many years before they finally confirmed it. So it was, for me, it was kind of a validation of, because even back then I kind of I was hearing the debate for that. I obviously looked at it and I went, I know that's a transgender woman, but they're not going to say it, and they're not going to say it because it wasn't time for that at that point in time, unfortunately. Now that we progressed to where we are now, it's kind of become almost like an apology in a way to yes, she is a post-op transsexual. We're sorry it took this long. And that's how it came across to me. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but that's how it came across to me.
It's funny because I might have my facts mixed up on this, but I thought it was the other way around. And it's, as you were just saying that, I'm like really raking my brain and trying to wonder why I think that. But I thought it was that that she was trans, and then in the recent game, what is it? It's what's it even called? Street Fighter Taken? Street Fighter Cross Taken? Like in that
Street Fighter Cross Tekken? Yeah.
Yeah, in that game, when that came out, the debate kind of like rebroiled, and everybody was talking about it again. And they basically said, Poison can be what you want her to be. If you want her to be trans, she's trans. But because people were upset that it was a trans character in a game, especially like Revived, and if you want her to be trans, she can be trans, but otherwise she can just be a woman in this game. And so it's interesting that we have the reverse idea of that, and I really want to look into it right now because that's so funny.
Yeah, definitely.
It's interesting that you bring up characters from fighting games, because particularly it's in, I think, the two genres of games that have maybe the most characters, or definitely implied, are RPGs and fighting games, which is an interesting concept.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if y'all know about Press XY. They do panels at different gaming conventions around the United States, mostly about trans stuff and trans stuff in gaming. And Shadashi from Press XY. This is I just remembered where I'm pulling this information from out of my brain. We had a chat about Poison, and one of the things. So it's what you were just describing, why it's in fighting games and why Poison was even trans to begin with. What she said, and I'm actually on my computer looking this up. I'm trying to figure out what the core of this is. But what she said was the reason why Poison was trans to begin with was because the idea of male characters beating up on a female character wasn't okay. So in order to have like this attractive feminine character in a game, they had to make her trans because that made it okay. I'm putting like hardcore air quotes around this, right? Like that made it okay for the male characters and the men in the game to be beating up this character. She couldn't just be a female at birth woman, because then it wouldn't be okay for the men to beat her up. And that's very problematic. That's a whole nother conversation if that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat must have missed the memo then. But
Mortal Kombat.
Must have missed the memo entirely.
Yeah.
But actually, I actually have it up here. And he's right. He's right. Sam is right about that. And also, that was it was actually Final Fight developer and Arika founder Akira Nishitani stated that he was one who said it's up to the viewers to decide whether the character was male, female, whatnot. But actually, it was Street Fighter 4's producer Yoshinori Ono that actually set the record straight in North America that Poison's officially a post-op transsexual woman. And in Japan, apparently, they just say she tucks away her business to look female, quote unquote. There, so there you go. That apparently that's kind of how it went down for that. So I find that definitely interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, it's troublesome.
The first game that I remember, and I remember this explicitly, that I was confronted with a blatant, not straight character for the first time was Metal Gear Solid 3. I don't know if any of you have played that.
I have not.
Nope.
I am not.
The antagonist, Volgin, the main big bad, is bi.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
And, it's... For once, it didn't beat around the bush. It was like, oh! Hello! And and it blew my mind from a
How
plot...
did it come up? Like in the how did you know that the character was bi? That's what I'm always curious about, and especially older games. They tended to try to it tended to almost be irrelevant, like and kind of a bit too hammer right on the nail. So I'm just curious, how did you know that? How did it come up?
It's if I remember the cutscenes correctly, it comes right out and says it, and
Okay.
also there's a minor character named Rykov who is very, very much modeled after the character Raiden in Metal Gear Solid 2 and later 4. I think, if I remember correctly, it comes just right out and says it. That they're lovers.
Wow.
And I could be wrong because it's been about 10, 12 years since I've played that game, but I remember it very clearly as being obvious. And, nobody, it's like nobody batted an eye, and the game takes place at the height of the Cold War. So, and it blew my mind from a plot perspective because I had never seen something like this before. Nothing, it wasn't, smash you over the head obvious. And I actually thought it made the story better. I'm like, oh wow, we've got a break from the standard heterosexual couple. Hey, how about that?
Mm-hmm.
It was great. I thought it was a definite change for the better in terms of the plot. And I wouldn't see something like this again until years later, when I started playing games by BioWare.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Specifically, Mass Effect and Dragon Age.
BioWare.
Although I complete the Metal Gear Solid trilogy before I started the first Dragon Age game. So
Dragon Age is so amazing. Oh my god.
although apparently, and I'm looking again, the very first game, the likely very first game to have an actual gay marriage scene was Fallout 2.
Yep.
And that was 1998. Which meant I was 13 at the time, and I played a bit of the first Fallout, but never Fallout 2. But I remember seeing, to a lot of acclaim, the fact that we had gay lesbian characters in BioWare games. I remember seeing a lot of praise, some flack, because you can't please everybody.
True.
And my first thought was that this was great, that finally we're starting to, we're dragging ourselves into the 21st century. It's, something other than the same schlock we've been presented with forever. Obviously, the industry has a long way to go. I mean, it was only, I mean, in Mass Effect, for example, um, you could only be, you could only have a love interest. You either had to be heterosexual or lesbian, and it wasn't until the third game that Shepard could hook up with a guy.
Oh, jeez.
So, it took a while. Dragon Age Origins, which I'm playing now, I have not made it all the way through yet, so I know there are gay characters in it. I just haven't met them yet.
That's an amazing game. I love that game.
I will scream forever about Liliana. Don't get me started. Like, all you hear is screaming.
You mentioned that it's not like in Dragon Age, for example, or in these modern games, Mass Effect 3, Dragon Age, whatever, that it's, that there hasn't been a big uproar, and there really has been, and that's kind of sad, but and I hate to, be the rain on the parade, but like Dragon Age 2, for example, the option of like the open romance options really upset the community, to the point where David Gator had to write like this really vehement email or like a public address and just be like, hey, sorry you're mad, but...
Yep, I remember that. The email where they said, you know what, fuck you if you're mad. We're BioWare, fuck you.
Yeah.
Well, explain to me. I mean, because again...
You've never read it? It was amazing. Oh my God.
I have not read it, so enlighten me.
So basically, a lot of people were upset that the Dragon Age was pushing gayness on people, right? Like, that's how they were perceiving it. They were perceiving it as, I just, like, it's like a straight dude, and he's like, I just want to play this game, and I just want to, like, make out with that chick and kill that dragon, and I'm good. Like, that's their gaming experience. And what is the character's name? Zephyr? I haven't played that game in years. What's the name of the rogue character?
Oh, God.
What is it?
It's been so long.
I pulled the response up from them. Do you want me to, like, quote it?
Yeah, read. There's, like, one paragraph that really just hammers it home.
The romances in the game are not for the straight male gamer, they're for everyone. We have a lot of fans, many of whom are neither straight nor male, and they deserve no less attention. We have good numbers, after all, on the people who actually use similar sorts of content in DAO, and thus don't need to resort to anecdotal evidence to support our idea that their numbers are not insignificant, and that's ignoring the idea that they don't have just as much right to play this kind of game they wish as anyone else. The rights of anyone with regards to a game are murky at best, but anyone who takes that stance must apply equally to both the minority as well as the majority. The majority has no inherent right to get more options than anyone else.
Yeah, and he just goes on from there. It was pretty great because people were just upset. Basically, they viewed it as like their game, like they were getting gayness pushed on them, right? Even though they were just options. And it's funny because it was just, it's just a perfect example of privilege in the sense of, in other games, you get straightness pushed on you all the time. There are a lot of games where you don't even have choices in romantic options. Like, you just have to be in a romantic relationship with this person to complete the story of the game. Yep. So Gator was just like, sorry, you're wrong. This is the way the world is.
To restrict options for others, the person who says that the only way to please them is to restrict options for other people is, if you ask me, the one who deserves it the least. And I'm like...
It's great.
It seems
it's fantastic.
that I mean, I don't know of too many other companies though who are starting to be that sort of progressive. I mean, you're allowed. I mean, in Bethesda with Skyrim, it's such an open world, and you basically do whatever the hell you want with your character.
I want to run around in circles for 7 hours on a horse. I can totally do that.
And I mean, Skyrim also gives you the freedom to marry whatever you like.
Mm-hmm.
Which...
And buy a house.
Several houses.
Yes.
This is like, Monopoly, Skyrim edition.
BioWare very much, like, so I had the opportunity to actually speak with the BioWare team of writers about why they do what they do. And it's incredible. Like, I didn't speak with everybody, but I spoke with a good chunk, and it's amazing hearing them talk about it because they get a lot of flack for what they do, and it's dangerous. And people are always worried that it's going to, their games aren't going to sell if you have a gay romance option and yada, yada, whatever. But time and time has proved again that that's an irrelevant fear, but it still is a fear. But for them, it's not really so much of, like, should we do this or shouldn't we do this? It's we have to do this. Like, it's our responsibility. They see it as a responsibility to create games that are welcoming and are representative of the people playing the games and create these amazing stories that everybody can feel like they're a part of. And it's crazy to hear that and hear them say that, and it seems so obvious when they talk about it, and they're so passionate about it. And they also make it really simple. They're like, if you want to have a gay character in a game, then you do. It's not that difficult. And but it's fascinating that other studios haven't jumped on that bandwagon yet.
Well, I mean, when it comes to the AAA developers, like a Valve or like a BioWare and so forth, I mean, they have and Bethesda, they have their own obstacles to get over in terms of public reaction to their release games, as opposed to like the indie scene.
Yep.
We don't have those same kinds of obstacles. They're still there, but we don't quite have them because for some reason the indie scene is looked on in a different light, where where people are expecting to see things that are just not of quote unquote what they consider to be the norm. And in a way, it's both a good and a bad thing, because there shouldn't really even be the norm to begin with, because it's gaming, for crying out loud. There should be nothing normal about it to begin with. But it's like, for instance, and not to talk my games up or anything like that, really, but like, for instance, in our first game, there's you start out with what you think is the traditional, male protagonist, who's actually, well, very villainous. But, you have the male protagonist, and you find out that he's married, and you're like, okay, well, this is, kind of normal. It's kind of normal, I guess you could say, type thing. But then, you come to find out that he is in a relationship with his wife, and his wife is in a relationship with another woman, and they have they have their own sexual experiences together, all three of them at one point in the game. So and then you're introduced to entire kingdom type place where it's inhabited solely by women, and that's actually an homage to Troya from Final Fantasy IV. Where you have a kingdom run by women. But in our game, it's taken to a different level, where it's where you have the women who are actually with one another in lesbian relationships and so forth. So it's not presented like it's over the head type thing. It's presented just as a part of the world. It's the story. It's how it was based upon. It's just what it is meant to be, and it's all natural. Nobody's saying, well, hey, you're gay. I can't believe that. No, it's just, okay, she's with her, or he's with him. That's what it is. It just, and I've gotten some interesting emails from customers who've bought our game and whatnot. And one of them really stood out to me, and it was basically, they said, I don't normally go for RPGs, but the reason why I liked yours was because you did something very different from a different viewpoint. I liked that you get to play as the Dark Lord. I liked this and that. And then they said, I really, really liked it that you presented lesbians in the right light. And I went, well, thank you. That means a lot to us. And I didn't know I didn't really see, it's such an infancy in the gaming industry to see LGBTQ, aspects and concepts in the gaming industry, because it's still in its infancy. It's just, I mean, we will cite examples from like 1998, but it's still very, very young in the industry to have something like that. So, when I see emails like that, it just makes me go, well, okay, that's, I guess we're doing something right in that aspect. I mean, myself, and I have no problem saying this, obviously, because everybody who knows it knows me. I'm an out and proud trans woman myself, actually. So, and for me to incorporate these ideas is not because of what I am or because of people on my team or anything like that. It's because of the nature of the story. So when I'm asked by somebody, or by an interview or anything like that, do you incorporate these ideas because of public pressure or because of, your own past, your own experiences? My answer is actually no. We incorporate these ideas because that's what the story in the world dictates. I let the story write itself, and I think if more developers adopted that notion, kind of like what we were talking about before, then I think you see a lot more inclusion of characters like that in gaming. But that's just my own 2 cents on that.
Well said. Keep doing what you're doing.
Indeed.
Keep doing what you're doing, because that right there is what the ultimate goal is. To have it just not, to have something like that be just normal. Doesn't stick out. It's not, meant to drive anything home. It just is. It's just there, and the gaming world, it just goes about its business, not batting an eye or calling attention to it. It's just there. It's normal as anything else.
And that's really what the point is that, and again, in the story of the game, that's what it boils down to. It's normal. It's not like, even in a lot of modern games that I played, when you're given either a choice to go with, a gay partner or so on, or, they make it it's not natural enough. It's not like, you don't have a developed relationship that gets to that point where you're just, where the ins and outs of the relationship and so forth, where you see the bickering and the bantering, because it's just like any other relationship, really. It's just not a deal in our games because it doesn't need to be. And I don't see why any game really out there has to make it into a deal when it could just be done naturally.
With the AAA developers, I'm thinking that there's still an element that they must think that if they try to include the LGBT community, as characters in the game, that they're going to take a financial hit. That's the only thing I can think of, that they perceive that if they do that, there is a massive risk and no one will buy their games.
Absolutely true. That they believe that. Not that it's not that that'll happen, but that is absolutely true.
And it's unfortunate. It is, and it's definitely an unfortunate truth. I have to agree. And again, that's also why the indie scene is just a different kind of scene than what you got from the AAA developers. We can, I guess you could say, we can afford to take those risks because that's what we do. We are the golden wave, I guess you could say, of the next AAA developers. We are what's coming. We are the future, but we also take those risks. I mean, take for instance, Mighty Number 9. Where
the game that's not Mega Man.
The game that's not Mega Man. I can't wait for it to come out personally. I can't wait for it to come out. It's going to be amazing. But like take that for instance, and now think about in terms of what if Inafune decided to go, well, I want Roll to be gay. Would he still have? Would his Kickstarter project still have made over $4 million? I think so. But that's my own opinion. But I definitely think so, because look at the talent that's there, and it's like, I don't foresee even major indie or commercial developers, even though they have that fear. I don't foresee. Even in terms of stats and sales, I don't foresee that becoming an issue. I just don't. I don't understand why it should be not as natural as any other relationship in a game.
I was on a couple panels at cons recently talking about the exact opposite of what you were just talking about. So not only would it not be a hit on their sales, it would probably, and it has been shown to, actually increase sales. Because you're just reaching a completely different section of this gamer universe. Like, we always talk about the gamer community, but when we talk about the gamer community, what we're really talking about is like this perceived idea of what gamers are, which is like a 18 to 24-year-old white guy. And that's not who gamers are. Like, we know that's just not the gamer community at large. So in the gamer universe, there are a ton of gaming communities, and with these games like Mass Effect 3 or Dragon Age 2, they're appealing to different gamer communities that other games are just completely overlooking. So it does seem like it would not only inhibit sales, but actually reach into markets, if you want to get really businessy, like reach into markets that they're otherwise just completely overlooking.
Yeah, I mean, didn't GamerCon just go off, and that was flipping huge?
Yeah, GamerX.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I got a press
GamerX,
pass to that and couldn't go. Can we please talk about how disappointed I was?
Yep, and they're
Anybody?
already planning the second year, and it's going to be
I
even
know.
bigger.
I will beg, borrow, and steal for another try at that, covering that. That would be great.
Yeah,
That was
when I
awesome.
saw that, I was like, "Ooh, this could be interesting." But ooh, I'm a
It's-
full-time art major, and
Yeah,
ooh,
exactly.
I'm
I was
so
like
broke.
80-hour weeks and broke, and no.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't think if I submitted a requisition request to the wife,
Yeah, they
uh,
would be no. I had the time, I just didn't have the money, and that was like, because it was all the way in fucking California, and I'm like, I hope the one that they're doing next year is on the East Coast. Nobody knows where it is yet. Please,
That
God,
would be
let it be on the East Coast.
Yeah. If you want me to answer that question, I can, but I don't
Do
want
you-
to make.
Can you? Oh my God, can you answer it in the chat box, please, please, please?
I have a hunch, we'll just say, and you're probably going to be sad, so I apologize in advance.
there you go, Kat. Preemptive sadness.
I'm jamming
Just
jamming in the
reading
chat
today.
box. I'm like, where is it?
I see that. So, I'm hoping that. I mean, I love just from a gamer perspective. I'm falling more and more in love with the indie scene because I am so sick of the franchise spam.
Well,
I'm getting sick of, I don't even play Call of Duty, but what are we on, 4 million now?
I mean,
Right.
right. You don't want Call of Duty 1,000,003? I mean, come on now. I mean,
We're on Grand Theft Auto 700,000, Resident Evil Frugal Pupillion. I'm just like, for fuck's sake, can we get some new ideas, please?
Well, it's like what Tanya was saying, though. I mean, like the indie scene right now is what the gaming scene was in the '90s, but the problem is that the gaming scene in the '90s, all those studios got huge, and then they merged, and then they merged, and they merged, and then we've got a few big studios that are making like the majority of the games that we play, or that you see on TV. But they're afraid to take risks, and it's crazy when you talk to developers. Like, why do you keep making like first-person shooters with the exact same mechanics and with just different skins? Because that's essentially what a lot of the games are. And they're like, because we know they sell, and we've got families, and we've got we have 150 employees, and they have to eat. So Tanya is totally right, and I love the indie scene for that, because like y'all are able to do some really amazing stuff because you have 4 people and you've got one product, and you're putting your heart and soul into it, and you can take risks that big studios are afraid to. And when you said that the indie scene is like this golden generation that's going to become the next AAAs, I think you're totally right with that as well.
I
Thank
hope
you.
so. I mean, I do go to PAX, but when I do go, I typically spend almost all of my time in the indie section on the expo floor. I could care less about what the big studios are doing. I want to see what the indie people are up to.
That's because we're the best.
Yeah.
It's
No amount of modesty there.
no, not at all. Absolutely not. Well, that's where the ideas are.
Well, look at a
It's
game
true,
like
though.
Gone Home, right? Like, look at a game like Gone Home. No studio would
Gone
have
Home.
ever given that a thumbs up. Ever.
Yeah,
Ever.
but look at what good reviews are coming in for that
Exactly.
game, though. I mean,
It's an amazing game.
Perfect example. A game that has no major publishing support, but became so popular that
Yep.
that its iconic character was included in other games. Super Meat Boy.
Oh, yeah. That's it, yeah.
yeah,
There you go.
Game Informer gave Gone Home an 8 out of 10. Which is a very, very good review. 8's pretty good, but I mean, just Gone Home just very critically acclaimed up and down. I was very, very happy to see that.
Another good indie that was really cool is Kentucky Route Zero was really cool.
And, that's where, as I said, all the ideas are, and that's where people can experimental with including LGBT characters because, there's a little risk, and as we've seen, it's welcome.
Yes, it is.
It's very welcome. So,
I mean, obviously, I've, and of course I can't, say names, but I've had certain people email the company, my company, and they go, I can't believe you would incorporate such and such into this game, blah, 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 and very, very few of them have I had it like that, thankfully. But the ones that I have, we always respond back, obviously very professionally, very courteously, but, when we respond back to them, we always ask the same question. Would you rather we didn't go with the story? And usually the responses we get back, ones we do get back for responses are usually just, well, no, you should go by the story, and well, that's what it calls for. And if you call them on that and you say, well, would you rather the game not be what it's supposed to be? Then where's your counter argument to that? I mean, there is none. We're putting out not a product. I can't consider it a product. It's my baby. Every single one is my baby.
I think of babies as products, so that's
yeah. But I mean, I spend 16 hours a day, 6 days a week on the sequel right now. It's become it's my passion. It's my blood. It's my soul. And and I will, and all my passion just goes into it. But I mean, I'm expecting, especially in like the first couple scenes in the game, I'm expecting for some emails to come into the company email and to say things like, one, I already know I'm going to get a couple and say, how could you kill her off in the very beginning? I already know I'm going to get that. But
spoilers much like
yeah, no, I already know I'm going to get that. But but like I'm also going to get why do you have why did you kill off the one half of the lesbian couple in the very beginning of the game, and emails like that too, and it's going to be a little tough to answer them because it's what the storyline called for, but. It's going to be a little tough for me because, I'll freely admit this. When I wrote that scene for that particular death scene, spoiler alert, it made me cry because it really struck a chord with me. And, and the whole scene, I was crying my eyes out. I mean, my wife can attest to that, is that, I was literally sitting there at the computer just crying my eyes out. And she came over, she's like, what's wrong? And I said, I killed her. Like I had to kill her off. I don't know why. That's what the storyline called for. And I'm really seriously expecting emails that are going to question, these design choices, these gameplay choices, whatnot, these story choices. Because we got in the last game too, we got these emails that just questioned so much of certain decisions that were made during the storyline and the gameplay, and you'll get that. From gamers across the board, you're going to get that, and no matter if you're in the AAA or the indie scene, you're going to get that, and you got to have a good response. And if you can call them on their, and if they do present bigotry or something like that, and you call them on it, then that's it. But if you don't, if you just kind of ignore it, then it doesn't really help any. And especially if these people are just not really, it's not so much ignorant as they are just ignorant of what goes on during the course of a game's development, and unfortunately, and I'm sure this is true for every game developer out there, we're not out there to please everybody, but we are looking to get our games out to as much of an audience as possible, but we don't want to do it at the cost of what we do for our passion. We don't want to do it at the cost of the story, And I'm sure we've all played games that have done that, that they've sacrificed story or they sacrificed gameplay to appease gamers. And Case in point, Mass Effect 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll concede that.
If you had asked me if I was the head of that company, and you asked me, Tanya, would they can't stand the editing to your game, would you change it for them? And I would tell you no, I would never do that, because I still to this day cannot believe that they caved in and actually did that.
No.
I think that there's a lot to be said for gamer involvement and whatnot, and for the fan involvement, which is great. I have a lot of fan involvement with our games, which is awesome. But you don't let them dictate the course of your production of the game, though. That's unless it's like a Kickstarter project or something like that. That's different. But if you're developing your game with a set story in mind, and you have these characters that are well developed and so forth, you're really gonna change your story to accommodate fans that a lot of times don't even know what they want.
Well, there you go.
I have to disagree with that.
There you go. Well, we have gone on this for about 45 minutes now. So if we have any final thoughts on this particular part of the discussion, we'll have those now. If not, we will cut to break and pick it up again in the second half. So do any of you have any further things to add?
Well, I just have one more thing to add, because I actually have to get going pretty soon, so I won't be there for the second half. I apologize for that. It's just that I do hope that that gamers across the board will come to realize the naturalness, I guess you could say, of GLBTQ relationships in games over time. I'm not expecting it to happen overnight, obviously, but I think more and more it's progressing to that point where I think it's going to be where it's going to become as natural as any other straight relationship and so on and so forth. I think that even in episode 2, we have coming out, and this is no little spoiler alert, it was hinted at in episode 1 where we have a transgender character, but in episode 2 it's become confirmed we do. And when the player comes across that, I hope they don't go, wow, ooh, really? Or instead they go, wow, that's different. And they just take it with that as natural as anything else. I hope so. I'm really hopeful. We have some great fans out there, and kudos to them for sticking with us and supporting us. And I think that it'll come across to them in a good light, and I hope that more developers do that.
Well, there you go. There you go. That's very, very well said. So, since you are not going to be around for the second half, because I know you have to go, thank you very, very much for coming on this episode with me and talking about this topic.
Well, you're most welcome, Brian. Like I said, I do work a lot, especially during development cycles, like right now with the sequel. But I'd be more than willing and happy to come back on when I have some time. I'm taking a month off in January, so.
And January is going to be about the time, since I'm going to be on semester break, is when I'm going to start recording the first 2 episodes of next season. So.
Yeah, it sounds good to me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and yeah. Enjoy yourselves. I'm gonna be going talking to programmers the rest of the day. So
fun.
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, Tanya, for coming on.
Thank you very much, and have a great day, all of you.
All right.
Take care.
So, with that said, we will cut to break. You guys out there in the wide world of the internet will have some music to listen to for a few minutes. We'll talk about how LGBT gamers are portrayed and in the industry itself. We've talked about them in games. Now, in the second half, we will talk about gamers themselves and how they are perceived in the community. That's on our second half. You're listening to Downloadable Content. We'll be back. Welcome back to Downloadable Content. Here on our second half, we are down to 3. Sam, Kat, and I are still left. Very, very good discussion in the first half. Again, massive, massive thanks to Tanya for coming on. So now we're going to shift to how gamers who are gay, lesbian, bi, trans are represented in the community. We've talked about them in games themselves, and now we'll talk about the gamers themselves.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Full disclosure, I do not play online games. I don't play multiplayer games, so I've never played WoW or...
I play more of those than is healthy. I don't play WoW anymore, though, and I can gladly tell you.
I have not played League of Legends, WoW, EVE. I'd like to get into those games, but I don't have the time.
They're fun.
I don't have the time and or money. So
League of Legends is free, dude.
I know League of Legends is free. But again, art student. No time for...
Yeah, considering each league match takes like half an hour. If you lose, you're at half an hour of your time. You have like nothing to show for it. You're like, oh, well, there goes that 40 minutes. Shit.
So, for me personally, as a straight white guy, I am largely sheltered from what goes on out in an online environment. My gaming is pretty much strictly console, single-player games. So I have no idea what goes on out there. I read blog posts and I have an idea of what goes on out there, but I do not know for certain. So I'm hoping that this second half will enlighten me a bit as to the goings-on of the gamer community.
I think it's funny how you're talking about it like it's this foreign world, like the online, like it's this mystical place.
Unicorns.
Narnia.
It's like Narnia, yeah.
To get to it, yeah.
Except Narnia is mostly peaceful.
Mostly.
Yeah, that's true, and that is a little different than the online community sometimes.
So obviously, it's significant enough, Sam, that you have created an entire website devoted to Gamers Against Bigotry. That's, the problem is severe enough that you want to call awareness to this.
Yes, absolutely, and that is quite true. And it's odd because when I started Gab, I kind of assumed that it was already happening because I played games and I played online games. Like I've been an online gamer for a long time, ever since Halo 2 came out on Xbox. Like Xbox Live, that was the first console I ever played online, and before that I played Counter-Strike online all the time. So I've always been aware of it, and it all kind of just it didn't seem to be getting better. Like with the rest of society, it seems like people are getting a bit less bigoted and people are starting to be a bit more accepting of identities that are different than theirs. But in the gaming world, it didn't seem to be getting better. And in a lot of ways, it seemed to be getting worse. And that was what finally pushed me to investigating to see if anything like Gab was already happening. And when it wasn't, I was sad. And I decided to give it a shot and just see what gamers would say when they were confronted with this idea of like, should gaming be welcoming to everybody? And the answer is yes.
I was like the 7th person to sign the pledge, and then we had to iron out the kinks from the beta website, and it was like, and then I sent you like all that feedback from like everyone that I knew. That was rad.
I know just for me on a personal level, I was a gamer that constantly used the word rape as it applied to gaming culture, because
I was also one of those. And it's embarrassing to admit it, to be honest.
And because it's ingrained, you don't know what you're doing until you're called out on it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And it was April. It was my wife that called me out on it. And
Ouch.
Well, she didn't bash me over the head with it. She didn't like go Super Saiyan and flay me alive about it. She mentioned it to me, and I'm like, holy fuck, you're absolutely right. And I have consciously stopped using it. So, small.
What was that like? What was that like for you, like, trying to, like, weed that out of your vocabulary?
Initially, it was pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Because again, if I'm playing games with a group of friends, in my apartment, or I go over, to their house, and again, it's that, the word rape is freely floated around.
Yep.
And, once, April made me aware of that, I started becoming much more conscious of it. And there have been a couple of occasions where I've stepped up and said, can we not use that? Can we not use that, please? And, now I'm much more aware of it. I mean, even, it's so ingrained in gamer culture.
Do you get met with a lot of resistance for being a wet noodle when you're that guy that goes, can we use another word?
No,
Yeah.
I have not. I have not met any resistance. I mean...
Oh, well, yeah, that's awesome then.
By and large, the group of friends I have are, what's the word? Human. And, and, all artists and nerds and, gamers. So I have not run across anyone who, gave me any sort of pushback.
I find that there's a lot of pushback, especially in, not even gonna lie, in a lot of communities, there's a lot of pushback for calling people out on a lot of shit, not just necessarily using the word rape, but just like, there's a pushback for ableist language, there's pushback for people being bigoted towards transgender people or non-binary people. There's just huge pushback, especially in games, where people can just be like, well, no, I don't like what you said, and then it deteriorates into, well, so-and-so's X, and we don't like that.
Yeah, I also, we have a couple articles on the site that are kind of like, here's how you can start having these conversations with people. Like, here's how you can call someone out for using bigoted language. And as a result of those articles, we'll get some emails of people being like, I tried to do this and it didn't go well, and here's what happened.
Yep, it doesn't go well.
No, it doesn't. And it's just one of those things that it doesn't go well a lot of times because it's the first time someone's heard it. But once they hear it from 2 or 3 different people... What'd you say?
No, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, like, once they've heard it from a few people, and they realize it's just, a lot of times people think it's just like one person being like, overly dramatic or looking for a problem where it doesn't exist or creating something out of nothing. So like, for example, a really common word that gamers use is gay. And they use that to mean everything. Like, it's the most versatile word that exists. Like, it's usually a bad thing, but it means every version of bad.
It's kind of like fuck. It's an all-purpose word.
Yeah, it's a very all-purpose word. But it's also, I mean, I don't have to tell you, like, it's troublesome and it's unfortunate and it's really unhealthy and not helpful for people who identify in that way to have that word be used as a ubiquitous bad word. Right? Like, it's just not good. And when you try to talk to people about that, it's crazy because a lot of times they've never been told that that's a harmful thing to say. Like, they've just never been addressed with that. And that's fascinating to me. So they don't even know that what they're saying could be harmful.
And again, because it's so ingrained, I also think that if you are the person that does speak up and say, ixnay, on whatever word, is not okay, I also think the phrasing on how you approach that is also key. I mean,
oh, for sure.
I mean, obviously, you don't want to be, angry and screaming it at everybody because you're not going to get a positive response. I mean, my wife, just approached it with me in a very, non-threatening, non-angry way. Just like, hey, I notice that you keep using this, in this case, the word rape, in this way, it makes me uncomfortable. Can you, try to stop using it? And, because words like gay or rape are so ingrained, something like, can you try?
Yeah.
Can you try? Makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
Not stop using this word. Can you try? Because it's very, very hard to undo years of conditioning. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
And eventually you start catching on more and more. You start catching your own speech and like, oh, what? Nope, don't use that. You might make some, you might, get some pretty bad reactions if you use that. Use it.
Yeah.
So it's becoming cognizant of that sort of language.
I just had a run-in with homophobic slurs last night in League of Legends, which surprises no one, but it still happened.
But I mean, how
Yeah.
how are they represented in the industry?
Just gay gamers? Or just... Yeah.
There aren't that many queer people. You mean like making games, or what are you talking about?
What do you mean?
I mean gamers themselves, not in the industry. That'll be later.
Okay.
I mean, I get
it's more vocal.
I mean, it is more vocal, but I get this. I don't know if it's, I know that bigotry exists in the gaming world, but I mean, how bad is it?
It's bad in some senses because in online gaming, there's two sides of that coin. There's a lot of ways that you can find bigotry, and there's a lot of places where you can find pockets of queer people. It just really depends on what you're looking for. You can either find a bunch of jerks, and like a lot of games, depending on basically the rule is that if you want to be around like typical straight white dude bros, you don't join a regular server where you just play the game. You don't do a player versus environment server. If you want to be around normal human beings, you go on the roleplay server. And that's it. That's the rule. That is the standard rule. Everybody that's gay usually goes on the roleplay server, and that leads to a lot of problems. You'd think it would be happy Rainbow Land, but it actually sucks.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I?
Yeah, I just think it's helpful for people to hear, just more of the...
This is just my opinion, so it means nothing, basically, but I just had a long discussion with a previous podcast that I think both of you have gotten linked to, but where we were discussing fetishists, and the problem with everybody and their brother flocking to the roleplay servers is that you get the people that are mostly cisgender straight females that are fetishizing gay men, and they get so pissed when you tell them, no, that is not okay. They flip out.
Yeah.
Like, I've had people ban me from voice servers. I've had people tell me to fuck off. Like, I don't give a fuck who the fuck you are. Like, really? Because I don't like your gay boy shit? Because I think it's offensive? Because you're creepy? Okay. And that's the long story of why I quit Warcraft. Because a bunch of straight girls decided to make a little gay roleplay clique, and there were like 12 of them, and there were the other 5 people that were still trying to roleplay stuff that wasn't like gay drama where somebody's boyfriend's father got murdered or whatever the flying fuck, and you're like, I don't want to do this. And they were just this loud majority, and if you decided to, this is how bad it got. They called me a homophobe. They legitimately looked me in the eyes and called me a homophobe. I was like, are you listening to yourself right now? They're like, we know how you are with gay men. You're a fucking homophobe. I'm like, bah, ha, you're cute. You're this coming from a straight white girl. Please tell me more.
Suddenly Cat becomes condescending Wonka. It's
it was, they told me I was a homophobe. Me, of all people.
I mean, so basically, you have to find the right group.
You have to find the right people, and that is another thing, too, because in online games, if you set up the right kind of guild, you will find the right people, but you have to make sure that you have officers that are enforcing your guild policies and that they know their shit. If your officers don't enforce the policies and they let in their friends and their friends turn out to be morons, you should still reserve the right to kick their friends. And that usually doesn't happen because then it becomes a hive mentality, and then you end up with the same crap and you end up with the same kind of people. The thing is that there's not really a systematic way to weed out. You can't say, all the fangirls and fetishists go over there. You just end up with them everywhere, and you just have to try and avoid these people. And that leads to a lot of angry intersectionality. And the new thing is to claim that girls like that are actually queer identities, and that is so offensive to me. I'm like, you are not queer, and they're starting to claim that they're trans, and these are these straight or I know a girl that's so into this gay love fest yaoi stuff that thinks she's transgender now because she just reads all this manga and is into this boy love thing, and I'm like, no, I think you need to go outside. And it's they just get really tone policey if you try and tell them that they're wrong or that they're being offensive. They just flip out. There's no talking to them. There's no reasoning. They just shut down.
Well, that's sad. I mean, again, I don't play online games. I mean, again, I have no
There's
idea
a lot
what
of
goes
room
on there.
for the thing is people think the gay community is like full of sunshine and rainbows in online games. It's actually full of a lot of backbiting and a lot of internalized like a lot of the guilds are really gay male and these straight male gamer are peer focused. So that makes it really uncomfortable for females and for trans people. So it turns into like this really overwhelming like echo chamber, and it's not a safe space for anybody that isn't involved in the little gay male thing. Like something like 70% of the fanfics on Archive of Our Own are male, and what do you want to bet that most of them are written by straight girls, you know?
I don't even know if I want to take that bet. That's
You don't. I can
Yeah.
assure you that you don't. Like I don't even want to go there because it's true, and it's just scary because they make guilds that have 12. My guild had 3 pages of no, you cannot be a homophobe, you can't do this and you can't do that, and they've ruined it. The point is that the gay community on games should be better, but it's not because it's stuck in this backbiting echo chamber of crap that people haven't figured out how to move on from, because these people still exist and they still perpetuate this very toxic environment. And until there's a way for all gamers to come together and be a part of a community that's mutually inclusive, there isn't going to be that kind of growth, especially in an online gaming sector.
Well, I think
Nailed it.
A big thing that I see a lot, like in what we're doing with Gab and just in general, is like we don't really take a very intersectional approach to things. Like we focus on one group or one aspect of the community instead of considering this whole gaming universe and all the gamers and all the different things that are going on, because it's easier to focus on one thing. But if you try to solve one problem, you're just going to create another one, right? Like if you try to focus on
Exactly.
the issues of what's happening with one particular group, then inevitably you're going to be marginalizing some other group. But it's really overwhelming to think about the alternative of trying to take a truly intersectional approach and trying to tackle all the issues, like the issues of race portrayal in games and ethnic portrayal in games and women in games and queer LGBT people in games all at the same time.
No.
That's also overwhelming to think about. So it's tough.
But the thing is, the community, especially the gay community as a whole in games, has to realize that there has to be a better standard for this than just saying the gay male and the straight girls get the majority and they never get to be called out on it. There needs to be a way to address that because it's really becoming an issue.
Yeah, because it's and I guess this would be kind of getting back to the original question, Brian. Like it's quite clear that people who aren't I hate using this combination of words because it's almost becoming trite, but like straight white male gamers, people who aren't welcome in the average space, right? So like if you just hop on Call of Duty and just jump into a lobby and play, like not using any friends list or anything like that, and you're not in that, like you don't have that combination of identities, and it comes out that you don't have that combination of identities, whether it's through your voice chat or through conversation, through whatever, you're going to be targeted, and not in the way that you normally are in a first-person shooter. You're going to be targeted by language, and sometimes like people will then in turn target you in the game as well. Like I know a lot of women who play Call of Duty, and when people find out that they're a woman, everybody just tries to kill that person, which makes it really hard because not only are you being verbally attacked, but it's also hard to play the game if everybody is trying to shoot you.
That's what happened with me in Warcraft. I've been playing Warcraft for about 7 years. And since the game started they released Wrath of the Lich King about 4 years ago, I wanted this very specific achievement. Unfortunately, it required 24 other people to complete. But the thing was that the group of straight girls and the people that called me a homophobe basically shafted me out of it because they didn't like me because they thought I was a homophobe for not doing their little thing. And I became a target in that point where I was excluded from a guild that was supposedly LGBT friendly because I didn't like their gay romance. And it was just it really hurt. And that's why I quit. I was like, I don't need this. I get excluded enough in the real world. I don't need it online. And it hurt more because it was from my own community and it was originally my guild, and no one helped except for my partner. No one stood up for me. I was like, really? There's 30 of you, and all 30 of you are in their boat? Okay, then this sucks.
Yeah.
was a really crappy experience. Not one I wish to repeat. And I think that a lot of gamers that don't fit the cookie cutter, whether that be straight white male or whether it be gay boy romance or whatever, you're going to be a target. It's going out there with like in the middle of a field and saying, "Hey, shoot me."
Yeah, no, you're totally right.
Which is sad, because in a perfect world, I mean, if you can play the game, what the hell does it matter?
Exactly. It's like, I can heal better than you. What do you want from me? And they just
Shifting gears from the online perspective to real life presence. I mean, as I've mentioned before, I go to PAX. I know the Penny Arcade guys are they keep shooting themselves in the foot.
Yep.
And the thing is, I don't read the comics. I never was a fan of their comics. I mean, before I went to my first PAX, I was like, oh, Penny Arcade Expo, and somebody's like, oh, it's from the Penny Arcade comic. I'm like, oh, had no idea. I was just like, ooh, video game convention, yay! And it was at PAX where I honestly felt a sense of community among gamers. And also, seeing a wonderful mix, seeing firsthand, personally, that the gaming community is not just a bunch of white guys, was a real eye-opener and very refreshing. I mean, there's conclusive proof right there.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, absolute conclusive proof that, there's a lot of female gamers out there, and statistically almost half of all gamers are women.
Yep.
And then, I see on the internet, the Penny Arcade guys keep opening their fucking mouths. And, I mean, April knows I go to PAX for that sort of community. I mean, I totally understand. I know people who stopped or refused to go to PAX because they don't feel comfortable. That is perfectly understandable. And, on occasion, I want to, hunt down the Penny Arcade guys and just slap them and be like, what are you doing? This is an all-encompassing medium, you shits.
Yeah, it's, I'm probably going to be more silent here than I'd like to be if we're going to talk about the Penny Arcade thing, just because with our organization and with me personally, there's a lot there, we'll just say. So we're really hoping that we're always hoping for the best in people, right? Like, we don't ever want to think that you can just that it's a good idea just to be like, okay, well, that community sucks. Like, WoW or LOL, like, League of Legends, that community is unhealthy and it's toxic, and let's not try to fix it. Like, we do believe in like an educative approach, and we believe that it's important to try to help people learn what's going on and what's wrong. That's just such a tough issue, because Mike and Jerry and Penny Arcade in general have said over and over that they want PAX to be an inclusive thing and that they want it to be for everybody, and then their actions speak louder than words, and it's just like, come on. Or their words speak louder than their actions, I guess is the better way of putting it. And it's like, come on, what are you doing?
And it's sad, because I mean, when I've been to PAX twice, and when I'm there, I really feel like I'm part of this great all-encompassing community. It's like, holy fuck, there are 70,000 people in this building just like me.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's a really powerful feeling. I agree.
And, I mean, even though I know that, a portion of my admission goes to the Penny Arcade guys. I know that. But when I go there, I largely just ignore that. I mean, my own little personal boycott of Penny Arcade. I don't buy any of their merchandise. I don't read their comic. I go there to support the indie games, and largely for the concerts. Because I'm a huge video game music nerd. And again, it's one of the few places I've ever been to where you can partake of what I call the video game bonding ritual, which occurs when you're waiting online for a panel.
Yeah, you're right.
When people that you've never even seen in your life ask you, "Yeah, you want in on this card game?" And they're my experience is that a lot of them are very friendly. A lot of gamers are very friendly. I mean, I'd like to see the good in humanity, but I know that the soft, seamy underbelly is there. And again, I know people who refuse to go to PAX, who boycott PAX, and I understand. I personally just feel like I don't want to cut off what is largely seen as a nice boost to the industry and gamers themselves. And it's sad that the Penny Arcade guys keep having to open their fucking mouths. It's like, just
If they could just not talk, that would be great.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have that same opinion. That is quite the norm. Or not the norm, but that is quite a common opinion. And yeah. It was amazing. It was like the last PAX, it was like the last day. The whole thing had gone so well. And it was my first PAX that I'd ever been to. And I was just like going there and I was very hesitant to go. And after 3 days, I was like, wow, you know what? Like, that was an incredibly powerful community experience. And like, I got to talk with so many people and I got to be on all these great diversity panels and talk with all these amazing people who are doing great things. And then that happened. I was like, God damn it. Like, why?
Yeah.
And I think going forward, I've read the article on the Gab site. Yeah, it's moving forward with PAX.
Yeah.
Which I thought was very well written. And, the premise of it basically, is like, if you don't like it, fix it.
Yeah.
Which is what I think should be done. I think more people should be like, okay, Penny Arcade, okay, guys, bad form. Just no.
Have to hold them accountable, and they've been living in a space where they are invincible. They never grew out of that high school superhero video game, Macho Man, look at all my guns thing. No one has ever said, no, you cannot do these things.
And as I said, it's very hard to undo years of conditioning. I mean, it was initially, as I said earlier, it was difficult for me initially to realize that, using the word rape in casual, gaming was offensive. Unfortunately, whereas I was, understanding and accepting of that fact, it seems that the Penny Arcade guys, they're apologetic not because of what they did, but because of the backlash.
Yep.
Yeah, they're only sorry because people called them out on it. That's called a false apology, and it's not actually real.
Yeah.
And, as was mentioned before, I mean, that's an example of pushback.
Yeah, but like I said, they don't understand that what they're doing is wrong, and more so, I think it's that a lot of the community realizes that they don't necessarily care. They have all kinds of money, why do they care? If they lose the LGBT community, it's not going to hurt their wallet, it's not going to not feed their families, they don't care.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely, when it comes down to it, like the voting with your dollars type thing is tough because...
Exactly, put your money where your mouth is, and if I choose not to put my money in PAX, then that's good for me because that's less money they're making. They don't need any more of it. And I think that the gay community has, as time goes on in gaming, way more buying power than they're giving them credit for, and eventually it is going to hurt them.
I hope so, but I also, it'd be kind of nice if it didn't come down to that. Like, if it didn't come down to this, like,
us versus them mentality is always bad. I don't want to advocate like a sheer separatist environment, but at the same time, there needs to be some genuine reform there, and I don't see that happening within the next 5 years. I certainly don't. This year has proven yet again that they've learned nothing. Next year, probably the same.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm kind of just as jaded to the whole thing as it sounds like you are.
I'm very jaded with PAX. Yeah. I've tried to explain to numerous people like why I don't go and why I don't advocate that. A lot of places that I work with go there, and I'm like, I can't logically do this. I can't support using this as a marketing tool. No matter the exposure, I will not be, for lack of a better term, a sellout.
Yeah.
And that is a perfectly understandable and valid opinion.
Yep, absolutely.
And if there were other, game conventions.
There was anything that was nicer. If they had more gaming presence at Boston Comic Con, that would be freaking great. But it's a Comic Con.
I mean, you're talking about the Boston Festival of Indie Games.
The Fig, if that gets huge, rad.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of sort of a take the rough with the smooth approach, but at the same time, there definitely needs to be some reform there. It's sad that there are many out there who feel incredibly uncomfortable going to such a large convention, which by and large celebrates gaming.
Yeah, it celebrates gaming, but at the same time, conventions, there's a lot of weird shit that happens at conventions, and I don't know how their public safety is, but from what I've seen, public safety actually tends to be kind of a joke when it comes to the gay community, because people will treat public safety issues for men and kids great, everyone else kind of not so really. And it's really fat phobic too, because most environments, fat people and gay people are usually just kind of the last, and if something happened to anybody, public safety wise, I would think that a community wouldn't necessarily gang up on them, but there have been way too many stories where it's somebody has been assaulted or somebody has been creeped on in a cosplay, or someone's been publicly shamed on Facebook because they dared to wear a cosplay that was they're overweight and they're wearing a cosplay, and some teenager goes LOL fat girl on the internet.
I think that, for something like that, I mean, this is true of any convention, whether it's video games or not. It's true for any large gathering of people. As much as we would like to have this idyllic, everyone gets along, peace, harmony sort of thing, when you have that many people in any enclosed space, you're going to have a few idiots.
I think more so what it is I'm not sure how PAX's public safety is. If women went to the public safety people and said, hey, someone's creeping on me, did they act?
I honestly can't tell you that, because I haven't a clue. I've never seen, I've only been there twice, but I've never seen or heard of any public safety issues. So, with that said, we shall move on to the last thing I want to talk about, and is how the gaming industry can be more progressive going forward. And Tanya touched on it about, more people getting involved in the industry, and eventually it'll reach a point of normal. But in the meantime, how can the industry be more accepting not only of gay, lesbian, bi gamers, but also their representation in video games themselves?
I think that the one thing that I took away from the conversations with the writers of BioWare is just to try. That's what people need to do. They need to take a risk, and they need to try, and they need to be willing to screw up. BioWare, it's not like every character they've made is perfect, and it's not like even all the LGBT type characters they've done have been necessarily the best, quote, representations of bisexuality or gayness or lesbian. It's not like they're the best, but they've tried. And by trying, they've created these experiences, and they've also learned, and they've created these experiences that are better for LGBT gamers, so they can play games and have romantic options that are what they would like to be able to role play. And it's just trying, it doesn't need to be that complex, I don't think.
You mentioned, Sam, that when BioWare, you spoke to BioWare, they basically you got the sense of, well, it's simple. They do what they do because it's the right thing.
Because it matters to them as individuals. Yeah.
They don't understand, what the push, what the resistance is. It's just do it.
Yeah, it's weird. They totally get the resistance, actually. Not to, I'm not, not to be argumentative, but they get it. They empathize with developers and studios who just don't have the ability to make those choices. Writers and studios where they're just not willing to take that risk. They're very empathetic of that. And I think that's pretty cool of them too, is that they're not sitting in this chair and pointing fingers and being all these other people should be doing this. They're just saying they feel like it's their personal responsibility, and they happen to work at a studio where they're able to do that stuff. That it aligns with their values,
This was we talked about this when I did the women in video games episode, that we mentioned that we should have, in order to have women better represented in video games, there should be more women working in the industry.
Yep.
And I feel the same way with the gay and lesbian community, that we need more of them
Absolutely.
as well. I mean, again, it's been proven beyond all doubt that video games are not a guys-only club.
Yep, my partner's a queer woman of color trying to design characters that are people of color in gaming. I'm like, that's an uphill battle, honey, but however I can help you, I will help you, because she's got such a great vision for her designs. It's like, I hope to God she gets hired by somebody where she can make a difference, because she's like, the characters that I see that are people of color, I'm like, that's the first time I've seen a character in a game that looks like me. That's so important. And it's like, I think that there needs to be a lot less whitewashing in general, but I can't speak for anybody that's a POC. I just know her experience is that she's just having to struggle so much because people are like, why don't they have lighter skin? Stop.
But yeah, I mean, I think that what you're just getting at is absolutely like a really easy solution. Like if you want to have a character in your game that's a queer character, that's a representative person, or that's even just like an accurate depiction of a trans character or a lesbian character or a gay character, it stands to reason that if you had a person who identified in that way and they could write from their own experience, that you would have a really good shot at creating that character. So hiring writers that represent the types of characters that you want to write.
Hey, they can hire me. That'd be chill.
There you go.
There was actually an academic paper, a study done in 2009, which explored the cultural production of LGBT representation in video games, and found that factors that would lead to a significant increase in LGBT content included producers in the industry. By that, they mean those who are personally, politically, or commercially interested in LGBT content. How the audience for a text or medium is constructed, meaning that what the public backlash from both the LGBT community and conservative groups will be, as well as industry-based reprisals in the form of censorship or ratings. The structure of the industry itself and how it is funded, and how homosexuality, bisexuality, or transgender identities can be represented in the medium. That almost seems like a fucking duh. But, there are challenges therein. But I think that the more people like this get involved, I mean, BioWare can do it. Why can't anyone else?
Yeah. That's kind of like a great, that'd be like a great poster. It's like you can too, like the Uncle Sam pointing the finger, like BioWare can do it, and it's like
Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah, but it's like a little sister instead. I don't know. Yeah, you can too.
So, and we see that it's starting. I mean, we see that, as I said way back at the beginning, that games are starting. I mean, the video game industry is only about a little more than 40 years old.
Yep.
So it's starting to shift. There is so much more to go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I think we don't do a good enough job of celebrating the good things. Like there are some great wins, and there are some really great examples of games. Like, I mean, we keep talking about them because they are the best examples, but like Dragon Age 2 and Mass Effect 3 are great examples. And there are a ton of indie games that do a really good job of creating these alternative stories, like these stories that represent people that aren't represented in most games. I think we could do a lot better job of highlighting those games and those things as great like case studies that other studios and other designers and writers could use as they're creating their own games.
Absolutely.
Anything more you'd like to add, Kat?
Yeah, like everyone said, I think the game developers just really need to try and get out there and take that risk, because they're not going to know really how their market's going to react unless they take that gamble. And somebody needs to be willing to do it that isn't BioWare, just to see, because no one's going to know until they try.
Yep.
And especially with the AAA studios, I think they can afford any sort of risk. I mean, really. Come on, Square, get the hell on it. It's, just to name one. Capcom's too busy killing every single one of its franchises to worry about that. But there is improvement. We just want to see more.
Yep, agreed.
So, any final thoughts from either of you about anything we've discussed on this episode?
I'll just say that if there are any studios or any writers or any people making games that do want to do a better job of creating diverse representations of characters in their games, and they don't know how to do it, they can reach out to us at Gab. We're creating a guide that will help designers and developers create more inclusive storylines. But in the meantime, we can put people in touch with. There's a lot of special interest groups and a lot of other organizations that are great resources for having those conversations. So reach out to Gamers Against Bigotry if this is something you want to do, and we can start that conversation. And if nothing else, point you in a good direction, and in best case scenario, answer some questions you might have that will get you going.
Excellent. Kat? Are you good?
I'm good.
You're good. All right. Alrighty. So, if you have any thoughts, comments, questions, suggestions on this episode or any other episode, you can go onto our Facebook page, facebook.com/downloadablecontent. You can find us on Twitter at DLContent, email dlcontent1@gmail.com. All episodes can be found on iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher, so there's a bunch of different ways for us to get downloadable content into your ears. So it remains for me to thank very much Kat and for basically assembling my entire panel. So thank you very much, Kat. Sam, thank you very much for taking a couple hours out of your day to talk about this with us.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
And go to his website, gamersagainstbigotry.org, sign the pledge. And Tanya, who has long since vanished, she what's the website for her studio?
I was just trying to look it up and I couldn't find it.
It's Kizara.com.
Thank you very much. All right.
How do you spell that, though? Because that's a very hard thing to Google.
Somebody type it into the chat box.
I just think for anybody listening, if they want to check out our game, because I know I want to. There it is.
There you go. I started it, and it wonderfully reminds me of Final Fantasy 4 and 6. It's lovely. So, alrighty. With that note, we'll put this episode to bed. I'm Brian. Have a good one, everybody.